So I walked in to a gentleman that I do business with regularly over in Ashland, Oregon. And he's a gentleman I've known for years. I don't want to say his name because he wants to remain anonymous because he's voting for Trump. But what was really interesting is that I asked him, I said, hey, so what do you think about this election? And he put his fist up like this. He said, Biden all the way. I kind of chuckled. I go, really? I don't really see you as a Biden man. He goes, oh no. He goes, I'm voting for Biden. And when they call me on the phone, I tell them I'm voting for Biden. And I told him, I said, I've heard this from a lot of people, not just you. And he goes, yeah, my wife went out and she bought some Trump signs and she wanted to put them in the yard. And I told her, I said, no, we can look at them in the garage. You will not be putting those in the yard. So it leads me to conclude that a lot of people, just like 2016, may be lying about their support for President Trump. Now, there's a couple things. I watched the polls very closely in 2016, and it's a little bit of alarming because I'm going to share some information with you here in a second about that. The polls in 2016, everyone said Hillary had a 99% chance of winning. The Investors Business Daily, which they use a third-party polling company, some of that has changed this year, and Rasmussen had Hillary at about a 2% advantage to 2.5% advantage over Trump, which clearly is not a 99.9% chance of victory. The lowest I saw, and I was paying close attention because I thought Trump was going to win. I told my friends that I think Trump was going to win. A lot of them didn't believe me. They thought, hey man, Mark, you're on drugs. Trump's not going to win this. He'll never be president. We have the video of maybe 50 different people talking about how Trump is not going to be your next president. All this in 2016, so it's a little scary. It's a little intimidating. Turns out it was just a ruse to try to get Trump supporters not to show up to the polls. So what's happening now is Rasmussen and Investor Business Daily, okay, they have both put Trump at an 8% deficit, just like some of the other polls, just like the mainstream polls. So this is a cause of concern. However, when I listen to people talk, they're even more afraid because the level of crazy has amplified this year, and people are shouting people down for being Trump supporters, trying to destroy their business. In our area, they've screamed at him saying, I hope your house burns down in the wildfires, while we had all this arson. We had a mixture of arson and wildfires going on in our valley. Another gentleman said, well, someone talked about the arsonists, boycott their business just for mentioning that 12 arsonists had been arrested. So what we have literally right now is a battle for the soul of America. Whether or not you like Donald Trump, the fact of the matter is, if the media, which is 95% of the reporters are Democrats, just to let you know, if the media can control the narrative, if the media can pick our president and lie as blatantly as they have lied about Donald Trump and get the public to believe them, okay, especially on policy issues. I mean, if they lie about something secondary, it's not as important except for with the politically correct crowd, which is slowly disenfranchising themselves because they keep adding criteria to it. But if they can pick the candidate just simply by not supporting someone, simply running on a ticket of hate, which is exactly what Biden's running on. He has no policy. Trump has actual policies. He has great policies in many areas. He wants to deregulate parts of the economy, especially during COVID. He has fixed disparity in sentencing. You can Google his accomplishments. Actually, I wouldn't Google. I would DuckDuckGo. I was Googling today, and I found a poll that had Trump at 38%. But it was from September, but it was the top of the search on this particular search that I did. So I don't really trust them for my news. But if you're looking at the polls, you're like, this is crazy. So I wanted to look at a few other things, okay? One of them was back in September, there was an article on Google showing that 38%. And when we go to September, right here on this list, and we go to the 24th and the 23rd, as Google was reporting Trump had 38% support, he actually was leading Obama for the same time in his administration with public support. He had 52% of likely voters they approved of his job, okay? So this is the type of thing that we're dealing with. If you look at the Washington Post, you look at the New York Times, Politico, the Atlantic, most of these papers have sworn to oppose Trump. Once someone is sworn to oppose someone, you can't trust anything they say from a neutral perspective. So the papers themselves, I mean, let's ask ourselves a question. These papers and these reporters basically said Trump called immigrants animals when he was talking about MS-13, and they never retracted the story. When he talked about the protesters for the Confederate statues, he excluded the Nazis when he said there were fine people on both sides, but they reported it like he didn't. I talk about this because it's important, because they never retracted those stories. Those stories were lies. They were verifiable lies. And the only people that still believe them are either not informed or they're what you would call willfully ignorant. They don't want to hear the truth because it questions everything they say. And I see this theme with leftists and Democrat voters now that I used to not see. I used to be able to identify with their anti-war movement and a lot of their things, but now they actually do not understand the other side of an issue, including people in my own family. If you ask them, well, do you understand the other side of that issue without calling names? Well, that's not what I do, is what one person told me. I don't do that. It's like, how can you be in a republic? How can you be voting on issues, the future of this country, and not understand both sides of the issue? But apparently that is the case. And because of that, when someone leaves the Biden camp and comes to the Trump camp, they never go back. There's key things that you can listen to people and they can talk. You know it. When you're listening to people talk, you're like, that person is misinformed. There's no way that person is a Trump voter. You know it. Now think about that. That's incredible to consider that there's a whole population of people that when you hear them talk and they express certain ignorance, you know they're not Trump voters. So they get these people on TV who claim to be Trump voters, then they say things that Trump voters would never say. Well, I used to vote for Trump, yada, 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 and they're talking, and it's like, wait a second, no, you've been a Democrat your whole life, and you're on this panel to try to sway public opinion, which is exactly, if you were in the 2008 election, if you were around voting and paying attention back then, they did it all the time. Every debate, they had a panel, and the panel was always against Ron Paul if he was in debate. That's just the way it is. They don't want that guy to win. So we're at a crossroads in this country. If the media can actually pick the president, it's game over for voting. There's no reason. It's over because if they don't like your candidate, all they have to do is lie about him, and there's a large enough population that will agree even though it's against their own self-interests. It's against your self-interests to vote for Biden. It's against everyone's self-interest for Biden. He doesn't do anything for any small people. Anyone in this country who's working, who has an income, who's producing and contributing, has no reason to vote for Biden. He's attacked the Second Amendment. He wants to attack the First Amendment. He wants to raise your taxes. He wants to continue regulations. He's been there for 47 years. You think he's going to stop? You think all of a sudden he's turned over a new leaf? And the reality of the matter is you're actually voting for Kamala Harris. If you're voting for Joe Biden, you're actually voting for Kamala Harris, which was probably the least popular candidate on the side of the Democrats, which means they're not taking care of their house. People who are in the Democrat Party right now, they're not Democratic, by the way, it's the Democrat Party. The people who are in the Democrat Party are not taking care of their house. They're voting for whoever the party puts up. That's what it looks like, okay? But let's look at Trump's approval polls right now. As recently as September 28th, he was at 46%, okay? 18th of September, he was at 53%. Today, yesterday he was at 47%, and today he's at 47% compared to Obama's 49% for the same time, same exact time in his presidency, okay? So how does that translate now if we go to the IBD or the TIPP presidential tracking poll? This is the poll, by the way, that had Trump winning or had him at least close enough within winning line in sight of winning, and now it has him at 42%. So apparently they're polling different people. There's no doubt, and this is beyond the margin of error. When you have Trump at 47 or 48% and your poll says 42%, you're outside the margin of error. Your poll is wrong. Either Rasmussen is wrong or Investor Business Daily is wrong. I have a tendency to think that Investor Business Daily is wrong. And all the other polls agree with them as well. They were all wrong, and we know just logic and reason. Let's use logic and reason. It's very difficult for people who are voting for Biden to do that. And yes, that's offensive, but it's true. But let's use logic and reason, okay? You have most news agencies that cannot, under any circumstances, tell the truth about Donald Trump if it's positive news. Go look at the Washington Post. Every article in the Washington Post is negative about Donald Trump. The day he won, the day that they declared Donald Trump the next president of the United States of America, there were 28 articles in the first 2 pages, something like that. Go back and look. It's insane. And they were all negative articles about Donald Trump. It's like there's a newspaper that was dedicated to misinformation about Donald Trump, which is also, they have a contract with a government agency that likes to spy on Americans and influence elections abroad. Do a little research on that and see how much you trust them now. Okay? So look at, if you want to look at the accurate polling, you do want to look at Rasmussen. They still have Trump behind 8 points in Rasmussen. Now, there is another possible explanation for this that's a little bit outside the box. But if you look at all the people who fled California, and you look at the people who've left New York, and you look at the people all heading to Florida, these people, if you talk to real estate agents, which I've done, okay, I've done some groundwork on this, and I don't know if the polling agencies are doing this or not. How many polling agencies are talking to real estate agents out there selling land to people fleeing these Democrat lockdown states? I don't know. I would say not a lot, but I talk to them. I ask them questions, and they tell me systematically that the people moving in are either former Democrats and they're upset with the Democrats they left, or they never were and they got out, which means states like Michigan and California are going to have a surge in Democrat votes, just like Portland has been under attack by Antifa for 100 and almost 40 days now, and their lead candidate is an Antifa person who hates Donald Trump, who's basically not promising anything good, as far as I can tell in my book. And it seems to me that if you had Antifa rioting in your city, you wouldn't want more of it. But all the people who don't want more of it have left. That's what's going on. And they've moved out, some of them to these swing states. So there's a very good potential that you're going to see a lot of unrest after the election, because if Donald Trump actually loses by 7 or 8% in the general election because California went 90% for him, or New York, who's left, went 90% for him, people are going to really want that popular vote. But is that smart? Of course, I say no, because you disenfranchise most of the states, most of the land. People argue, well, should land be voting? That's not what we're arguing. What we're arguing is, in the global scale, if we had a global government, will we let China and India just run everything and call every policy where you never have a voice? Would you want that? Of course you wouldn't want that. The only reason you want the popular vote is because you think you're going to be India and China, which is not progressive at all. It's regressive. It's backwards, hillbilly, caveman garbage is what it is. That's all it is. I am willing to vote away everything that I believe in because I think I'm going to win. So I'm going to destroy all the processes. So those are my thoughts for now. I've got a call coming in. Leave your comments in the box below. I'd love to hear what you think.